Hey everyone, I just really hurt my arm there. Don't get frozen shoulder. Oh my gosh. Let's try this intro again. Welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome to my channel. If you don't know, I'm Cam, and I like corners. I like when planes intersect at 90-degree angles. That's like my thing. No, books are my thing, and I was just the weird kid in the corner with a book my whole life. So anyway, this video is a book haul. If you've seen my previous vlog, which will probably be up just before this one loads, I was having work burnout. I had to go back to work for the first time in 2.5 years, and it means that I am more tired. It means that I am more stressed. It means that I have almost no time for reading, which is the reason why about 13 years ago, I stopped reading. I started this job, a soul-crushing event of exhaustion ever since. BookTube got me back into reading, and I could tell that I was already burning out being back in the office. And so I'm like, I need to go to a bookstore. I need to be surrounded by books. I need to have pages and words and colorful, beautiful covers surround me. And so I did. And wouldn't you know, it definitely cured my book burnout. I specifically went in for 2 books. That's all I was gonna get. I was gonna get 2 books. I got one of those books. I did not get the 2 because by the time I got around to that section of the bookstore, I was holding 6 books. And I'm like, I have to stop. I can't do more. I have to stop. So what I have for you is a book haul of 7 books because I did get one book just on a whim actually when I was at Costco and I was picking up a rotisserie chicken. So let's get into the books that I got. Now, I'm really happy to say that not intentionally, but just because these are the books that spoke to me, these are the books that jumped out at me, and I just had to pick up. 4 of the 6 books that I got from the bookstore are books from non-white, non-American people of color. Not all of them are from non-American authors, but they are from BIPOC authors or from authors from Asia or from Africa. And I'm very, very excited that those are the books that just jumped out at me and that I had to get. So 2 of them are from white authors. Neither are American, but one is Russian lit and one is British. So let's just get into it. So I'm going to start with the book that I got from Costco. This is The Daughter of Auschwitz. So I, if you don't know, am very passionate about books about the Holocaust in particular. World War II, not super my reading genre per se, and it does seem to be a genre in and of itself, but in particular, books about the Holocaust, especially life stories, because I think it is so unbelievably important that we do not let the world and history forget. And there are so few survivors left anymore that I think reading their memoirs, reading their stories is super, super, super important. And I had never heard of this one. So this is by Toma Friedman, and a journalist, Malcolm Brabant, actually helped her write this. And I am not going to do this book justice, so I'm just going to read you the blurb. And there's a picture of her. I really hope my camera is going to focus. I am a survivor. That comes with a survivor's obligation to represent 1.5 million Jewish children murdered by the Nazis. They cannot speak. So I must speak on their behalf. Tova Friedman, one of the youngest people to emerge from Auschwitz. After surviving the liquidation of the Jewish ghetto in central Poland, where she lived as a toddler, Tova was 4 when she and her parents were sent to a Nazi labor camp. She was almost 6 when she and her mother were forced into a packed cattle truck and sent to Auschwitz II, also known as Birkenau concentration camp, while her father was transported to Dachau. During 6 months of incarceration at Birkenau, Tova witnessed atrocities that she could never forget and experienced numerous escapes from death. She is one of a handful of Jews to have entered a gas chamber and lived to tell the tale. As Nazi killing squads roamed Birkenau before abandoning the camp in January 1945, Tova and her mother hid among the corpses. After being liberated by the Russians, they made their way back to their hometown in Poland. Eventually, Tova's father tracked them down and the family was reunited. Like, I'm already gonna cry. In The Daughter of Auschwitz, Tova immortalizes what she saw to keep the story of the Holocaust, the Shoah, alive at a time when it's in danger of fading from memory. She has used these memories that have shaped her life to honor the victims. Written with award-winning former war reporter Malcolm Brabant, this is an extremely important book. Together, they have painstakingly recreated Tova's extraordinary story about the world's worst ever crime. I couldn't not get this book. And then I actually ended up seeing this at Barnes & Noble when I went later. And had I not seen this at Costco, I would have grabbed it at Barnes & Noble. I have read 2 or 3 memoirs of children who went into the Holocaust camps as children. There's nothing like reading a book from a survivor, from a child survivor of such a genocidal atrocity. And it's not just the Holocaust. There was the civil war between the Hutus and the Tutsis. There was the Khmer Rouge. I mean, these stories are so important, I feel like. And I snatch them up every time I can find them. It does take me a while to read them, though, because you have to be prepared to be emotionally destroyed. There are fiction and fantasy stories that you can read that talk about these kinds of themes and that are incredibly powerful and emotional, and they can, send you reeling. But to read an actual life story of a survivor of these things are not fictionalized. These are not even embellished. They can be very, very difficult, and I completely understand that there are some people who cannot read them. I am one of the people who can, because while I can be emotionally destroyed, I can walk away from it pretty much unscathed but deeply affected. I encourage those people who can do that to read these stories, because it's, like it said, the world, history is in danger of forgetting these things. They can't be forgotten. They can't. So The Daughter of Auschwitz was the first book that I picked up at Costco, and now we will get into the 6 books that I meant to just have 2 from Barnes & Noble. Of course I put it on the bottom, but that's the one that I want to start with. So, and excuse me if you can hear crickets. I have the window open because my cat, who ran away a few days ago, is currently in the window enjoying life, and I didn't have the heart to kick him out. So the window is open, and I'm hoping the microphone's not picking up. It probably is. Okay, so anyway, one of the 2 books that I went to the bookstore for was Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So obviously Tolstoy is a very, very famous Russian author. I have never read Anna Karenina. I've never watched any movie adaptations or miniseries of Anna Karenina. I've had a growing interest in it, though, from watching different YouTubers, especially Carolyn Mary Reed's, who I will link in the description. I believe this is her all-time favorite book. And I know that her and Emma from Emmy, as her channel, have been doing the Dickens versus Tolstoy, which I'm absolutely loving. I will link that in the description as well. When I read the synopsis, I believe in high school, I was like, that sounds terrible. That sounds like a terrible plot. It sounds like a very selfish group of uninteresting people, and I don't want to read it. So I ignored it for years and years and years. And then I read War and Peace, and it is to this day one of my all-time favorite books. It is one of, if not the greatest literary work I have ever read. And just from hearing people talk about how much they love this book, I'm going back and as an adult now, and I'm like, I want to read it. I want to give it a shot. And I have this thing. So I really appreciate audiobooks, But when it comes to classics, and when it comes to classics that I've really, really, really wanted to read, I don't want to listen to them on audiobook. I want to read them for myself. That's a challenge when you have zero time and energy. So I bought the book, and I got from Audible the audiobook with Maggie Gyllenhaal as the narrator. And I got that one specifically because Carolyn Mary Reed talks about how that was one of the, if not the best narrations she had ever heard, and that Maggie Gyllenhaal did such an amazing job of bringing everything to life and being Anna Karenina. So that actually made me excited. So what I will probably try to do with this one is if I find that I am unable to read it with my own eyeballs in a timely manner, then I will probably listen to the audiobook while having the physical copy with me. This copy, like, I think it's an okay cover. Maybe there's some special meaning to it, but to me it's kind of bland. But also it has, I believe it's called deckled edges. Am I right about that? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, where it's like, it's not smooth. Like, they're intended to feel very rough, very old printing press kind of thing. I used to love deckled edge books. I don't like them now. I don't know why, but it doesn't feel as inviting somehow. But other than that, the translators, Richard Pavir and Larissa Volokhonsky, they did the translations of War and Peace, the copy that I have, and Fyodor Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov that I have read. I do trust their narration or their translation. So I am actually excited to pick this up. It will probably be a while though, because I'm currently trying to get through The Three Musketeers, and I am 85 pages into, I don't know, 600 pages, 700, who knows? The book's gigantic. I think it's bigger than this. So this will eventually be on my TBR. It's on my TBR. But that is the first book that I got. Okay, so now if you saw my vlog, you saw me totally obsessing about the section of books that was the classic books in the, what's it called? Chiltern? I think that the Chiltern special editions. Look at this book. This is, oh, can you tell? I really hope the camera is going to focus properly. The gilding, is it gilding? Gilding? I don't know. Whatever. Embossing on this book is just fabulous. I am not the world's biggest hardcover fan. I don't enjoy reading out of a hardcover because I find it heavy and cumbersome. I like to read in bed a lot, and hardcover books don't always work really well for that. But this is just, it's gorgeous, and it has its own built-in bookmark, which I do love, which I'm sure my cat will play with. The pages are incredibly thick and shiny and smooth, which is an interesting paper choice. But you know, if you're doing the gold edging and everything on it, you're trying to up your game. Oh no, the bookmark fell out. So there were so many other copies of different books that were just absolutely stunning, and I loved some of them. I really, really, really loved quite a lot of them actually. The problem is, every single one of them that I thought was beautiful and I wanted to buy, I already owned the book. I am not one of those people that can own multiple copies of a book just because the edition and the cover is different. I have very limited real estate when it comes to my bookshelf, and that is bookshelf singular. I don't have the space, and I don't have the desire to have 4 different copies of something because they look pretty but different. So I had to pick one that I had not read yet and that I do not own a copy of. So I ended up going with Anne Bronte's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall. I believe this is Anne Bronte's only novel. I have read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and I've read Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I enjoyed them. Not my favorite books, but they were good. So I wanted to read The Last Bronte Sister, and if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the only book she read because she unfortunately died very young. It wasn't panned, I don't think by any means, but it was definitely held up in comparison to her 2 sisters and it was not as well received. The criticism of it was that it was more amateurish in the writing style compared to Wuthering Heights and compared to Jane Eyre, which is fine for me. I really wanted one of the copies of this edition of something, the special printing edition of these books. I thought this was absolutely gorgeous, and it's by an author that I had been wanting to read, so I picked this one up. And even the corners, they're not sharp. They're edged really nicely. I'm excited to read this. I think this is going to be, it's just going to be a pleasure to read, I think. I'm not going to look at it, I'm not going to try to judge it too harshly as like a classic, because I definitely think I judge classics very harshly, because if you're going to tell me that something is a classic and a must-read and a timeless book that every generation should enjoy, that had better be a really good book. I know the criticisms of this book already, so I think I'm probably going to go kind of easy on it. I just want to enjoy a book with a beautiful edition of it. That is The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. Now we get into our BIPOC collection, and I'm very excited. My first pick was Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I don't know why I always want to say George Ellison. I don't know if that's another author, but every time my brain thinks of the author of this book, it comes up George Ellison, and I don't know why. But anyway, Invisible Man, I have wanted to read for years, and I have, on my phone, I think I have a free ebook copy of it, and I read like, I don't know, in the ebook it was like the first 3 or 5 pages, and I could tell already I really liked the writing style, I really liked the voice, and I was really, really interested to see the book develop. So if you are not familiar, I will read you the blurb, because again, I am never going to do a book justice, especially when I haven't read it. I know kind of what it's about. I'm not good at explaining it, so I'm just going to read the blurb. So, first published in 1952 and immediately hailed as a masterpiece, Invisible Man is one of those rare novels that have changed the shape of American literature. For not only does Ralph Ellison's nightmare journey across the racial divide tell unparalleled truths about the nature of bigotry and its effects on the minds of both victims and perpetrators, it gives us an entirely new model of what a novel can be. So excited. As he journeys from the Deep South to the streets and basements of Harlem, from a horrifying battle royale where black men are reduced to fighting animals, to a communist rally where they are elevated to the status of trophies, Ralph Ellison's nameless protagonist ushers readers into a parallel universe that throws our own into harsh and even hilarious relief, suspenseful and sardonic, narrated in a voice that takes in the symphonic rage of the American language, black and white. Invisible Man is one of the most audacious and dazzling novels of our time. First of all, can we talk about how great that blurb is on the back? I mean, if that doesn't make you want to read this, I don't know what would. So basically, the premise of why it's called Invisible Man is, if I'm understanding it correctly, again, I haven't read it yet, but I've read little sections of it. It is the voice in the 1950s of a black man who is, by definition, invisible in society. Yes, he has friends. Yes, he has a job. But when it comes to community planning and to government and to healthcare and to, society at large, he is invisible to those who control those elements that make up society. And he is one of many, 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 many black people in 1950s America that are there. They're a force. They are a populace, and they're critical to the success and to the infrastructure of an entire nation, and yet they're invisible to those in power when it's convenient for it to be. So I am so excited to start reading this. Again, this is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. So we are going to stick with American authors for the time being. We first had Ralph Ellison. Now we have Toni Morrison with Sula. Toni Morrison, if you don't know, is a lovely, amazing, talented, incredibly famous author who has written what was it? Song of Solomon, The Bluest Eyes, Beloved is probably her most famous book that at least I can think of. So many others. There was a ton on the shelf, and I was reading the backs of every single one of them, and they're all about this size. None of them are super big. And I read the back of every single one of them, and this one just jumped out at me for right now for what I really wanted to read. I almost started with Beloved, but I read a section of it a while ago, and I did a little bit of research, and I realized it's like stream of consciousness writing. That is not a style I can deal with, honestly. My brain doesn't follow it well. It doesn't pick up and keep the themes very well. The fractured nature of the novel means that I have a very fractured picture of the book as a whole. It's an incredibly effective and powerful style for so many people. To me, it's like trying to see a jigsaw puzzle without like having turned over half of the pieces. I can see that stuff is supposed to fit together, but I don't even have an image of what it's supposed to be. I don't know. It's just the way that my brain works or doesn't work when it comes to that style. So one of the ones that I wanted to pick was not a stream of consciousness story, and the blurb for Sula really spoke to me on that. Two girls who grow up to become women. Two friends who become something worse than enemies. In this brilliantly imagined novel, Nobel Prize laureate Toni Morrison tells the story of Nell Wright and Sula Peace, who meet as children in the small town of Medallion, Ohio. First of all, nothing good comes out of Ohio. Their devotion is fierce enough to withstand bullies and the burden of a dreadful secret. It endures even after Nell has grown up to be a pillar of the Black community and Sula has become a pariah. But their friendship ends in an unforgivable betrayal. Or does it? Terrifying, comic, ribald, and tragic, Sula is a work that overflows with life. For a book this short, I kind of like going into it without really having much information. There's no major plot points that are hit other than this is a book of conflict, this is a book of identity, this is a book of friendship and sisterhood and betrayal, and if redemption is possible from those things. So other than that, I don't know anything about the story, and I like it that way. The covers are really interesting because in this printing, this collection by Vintage, just says Vintage something? Anyway, the spines of the books all tied in together to make this kind of almost like a kaleidoscope of color. And they even had a 3-book box set that I think was King Solomon, The Bluest Eyes, and Beloved, if I'm not mistaken. But all of the other novels from Toni Morrison that were in that section were all the vintage edition, and the spines just made this beautiful kaleidoscope. So I am going to be happy if I can get through Sula and then go pick another book and start my own Toni Morrison collection. I think I actually used to have King Solomon, or Song of Solomon. Is it Song of Solomon or is it King Solomon? I feel like it's Song of Solomon. A friend gave it to me, my bookish friend, and she had given me, she was moving, and I think she gave me like an entire laundry basket full of books. And she went through and kind of told me which ones she thought I would like. One of them was War and Peace. That was one of the ones that I read around that time. I think I only ended up keeping about half of the books though. I didn't have room, and so I just kind of went through and grabbed, just sort of random ones. And I think the Toni Morrison book, and I want to say it was Song of Solomon, did not make it to my bookshelf. And years later, when I went looking for it, I thought for sure I had kept it, and it turns out I did not. And so I am very excited to pick up my first Toni Morrison book, Sula. My next book is, again, by a Black author, How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue. I saw this on the shelf, and it had a little card underneath where the bookstore staff writes like kind of little tags to draw your attention to different books. And I don't remember the tag on this one, but it was something like one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. And so I had just picked up in my pile Invisible Man and Sula, and just down the bookshelf a ways was How Beautiful We Are, and it was sitting out facing this way, and it just grabbed me. The cover just caught my attention. So I'm going to read the blurb on the back, and it says, "We should have known the end was near." So begins Imbolo Mbue's powerful novel, How Beautiful We Were. Set in the fictional African village of Kosawa, it tells of a people living in fear amid environmental degradation wrought by an American oil company. Because what else does American oil companies bring, frankly? Pipeline spills have rendered farmlands infertile. Children are dying from drinking toxic water. Promises of cleanup and financial reparations to the villagers are made and ignored. Left with few choices, the people of Kosawa decide to fight back. Their struggle will last for decades and come at a steep price. Told from the perspective of a generation of children and the family of a girl named Thula who grows up to become a revolutionary, How Beautiful We Were is a masterful exploration of what happens when the reckless drive for profit, coupled with the ghost of colonialism, comes up against one community's determination to hold on to its ancestral land and a young woman's willingness to sacrifice everything for the sake of her people's freedom. Come on. Like, I'm not going to read this. So I am very excited to read this perspective from a fictionalized standpoint of colonialism, greed, profit, corporations stripping away Native people's land, Native people's resources, and then empty promises to give them any kind of help after killing them all off, basically. And I think a theme that this book touches on, did I read? I'm trying to remember if I looked this up online, but I thought I read that one of the themes is a possibly violent revolution as a method to fight back against this American oil company. And then the generations that come after that and the dealing with the aftermath of violent revolution, and is violence the answer to these kinds of horrific problems that are plaguing people around the world. And that really interested me as well, because there are so many people who think that violence is the only way to address a problem because they feel like they don't have any other resource or recourse. But then the scar that leaves on future generations. I think it's a really interesting thing to explore, not just from the point of the revolution, but the generations that come after that. And so I am very excited to read How Beautiful We Were by Imbolo Mbue. And then the final sixth book that I grabbed, Osamu Dazai's The Setting Sun. Here we have a definitely non-American. This is a Japanese author with, he was the author of the book I just read earlier this year, No Longer Human. Totally not the book that I thought it was going to be. I completely misunderstood what the plot or what the story was going to be, but it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating how he developed this this novel, this idea of somebody who just never felt any sort of connection to humanity and society as a whole, while being and understanding that they are a human being. Really incredible. So when I saw this cover, I was like, oh, that looks really similar. And sure enough, it was Osamu Dazai. So again, the printing of the book is very similar in style to the cover of No Longer Human. And the blurb on the back says, this powerful and tragic novel, I'm pulling all kinds of tragic novels this time, I guess. This powerful and tragic novel vividly paints life in a nation in social and moral crisis. Set in the early post-war years, it probes the destructive effects of war and the transition from a feudal Japan to an industrialized society. Osamu Dazai died a suicide in 1948. But the influence of his book has made people of the setting sun a permanent part of the Japanese language, and his heroine, Kazuko, a young aristocrat who deliberately abandons her class, a symbol for the enemy that pervades much of the modern world. Feudal Japan? I'm in. The end of feudal Japan into the industrialized era? I'm in. An aristocrat who abandons class to become a servant and a savior of the people? I'm in. Are you kidding me? If you know my anime choices, you would know this. Super, super excited about this. Again, a very short novel, very much like No Longer Human. I have a feeling this is going to be a very quick read, but if it is anything like his first book that I read, I am going to love this. I'm so excited. That is my book haul. I have so many books that I just want to read at the same time. And so right now I am currently reading The Three Musketeers. I don't have an audiobook in progress. I don't have an ebook in progress. It's just The Three Musketeers. So I am going to be trying to find something else to either listen to or to have on my phone, because I am not carrying around The Three Musketeers to work and everywhere else I go. But thank you so much for joining me on my book haul. If you have read any of these books, please tell me down in the comments below which ones you've read, what you thought about them, you know, how they gave you a different perspective, how they changed the way you think, or how they solidified something that you already felt was, you know, a piece of you or a piece of society that you felt was a truism. I would love to hear your takes on some of these books. There's classics, modern classics, there's contemporary in here, and I feel like this is everybody can find something in the stack of books that they would enjoy reading. So if you've not read these books, comment down below and tell me if any of these piqued your interest and if you would like to pick these up. And as soon as I get around to them, you will see either my reading vlogs or my wrap up where I talk about these. So thank you again so much for joining me. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Please be kind to others. Please be safe. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'll see you in the next one.